Right, people, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at your drafts. I'm going to be rating them. I sent out a tweet on X and I put on my Instagram story for you to send your screenshots of your teams. So I've taken a few of them and we're going to rate them. So let's get into it. Before we get started, I'm going to run each of these teams into Fantasy Football Hub's team rating tool. As you can see on screen, it will give you a percentage rating when you upload your team. All you have to do is click on the link in the description, upload a screenshot from the pick team page in the FPL app, and the AI model will rate it out of 100%. As you can see in the top left corner, this team has 94%. So yeah, if you want to get your team rated for free by the AI model at Fantasy Football Hub, then look at the link in the description. They also have 50% off memberships currently. That ends on the Game Week 1 deadline, I believe. So make sure you're signing up for that. I use kind of everything in the Fantasy Football Hub toolbox that you can see at the top left there. When I do my research, it's got Opta stats, it's got fixture analyzers, it's got points predictions, it's got all sorts. Really helpful. So yeah, make sure you're getting 50% off by signing up before the Game Week 1 deadline. They're also running a deal whereby if you don't win your mini league, you'll get your money back. That also ends at the Game Week 1 deadline, I believe. So make sure you're signing up for that now as well. So this first team that you can see on screen was sent in by Jacob Williams on Twitter or X. So thank you, Jacob. It has Pickford in goal, Trent, Gvardiol, Munoz, Eze, Bruno Fernandes, Nkunku, Diogo Jota, Haaland, Isak, João Pedro. 4 million keeper on the bench. It has Smith Rowe, Konsa, and Wesley Face as the 4 million defender. So, firstly, got Smith Rowe first sub on here. I'm not really sure whether he'd be in the starting 11, potentially over João Pedro. But I like Smith Rowe as a pick. I think he's an absolutely brilliant pick. I'm looking at him myself as well. I think he is probably the best of the 5.5 million midfielders. So if I were to go with one of them in my team, I'd definitely be picking Smith Rowe. He's also got Pickford in goal. I'm not big on Pickford in goal personally. I think that spending 5 million is unnecessary when there's 4.5 million options such as Dean Henderson and Flecken. I think they're just as good for 0.5 million less, so I don't see the point in spending that extra. I did notice he's got 0.5 million in the bank on this draft. Potentially that could be used to do Isak to Watkins in game week 3, if that's something you'll want to do. Potentially isn't, but yeah, that's an option. I like the back line of Trent, Gvardiol, and Munoz. If Munoz is fit, I did notice he came off in Palace's last friendly for Nathaniel Klein in around the 50-something minute, I believe. And I think he had an ice pack on his knee, so that will need to be monitored before the deadline. If he's fit, I really like him. But yeah, that will need to be monitored as we get closer to the deadline. The other players are just good. So Eze, Fernandes, and Nkunku, I like all of them. They're all in my team that I posted the other day. Same as the front three. They're all in my team I posted the other day. Diogo Jota's an interesting one. He obviously started in the friendly at the weekend for Liverpool as the striker. So at 7.5 million, if you're getting Liverpool striker, that's pretty good. Obviously, the caveat is, does he have the minutes? Will he start every game? I'm not quite convinced of that. I don't think Darwin and Gakpo are just going to be bit part players in the Premier League. I solely expect them to play games and start games. So I think Jota's good for the first few fixtures. I do think he'll start up front in the first few, but long term, I'm not so sure. As you can see at the top left, the team has a rating of 94%. That's pretty high from what I've seen. Obviously has Haaland instead of Salah, not as well as Salah, which I do currently agree with as well. My current team has Haaland and no Salah. So yeah, good team. I'd give it probably around an 8 or 9 out of 10. It's somewhat similar to mine. So, yeah, good team. Right, on to the next one. This one was also sent in on Twitter by FPL Hitman, so thank you. This one is very different to a lot of teams I've seen, to be honest. Firstly, what jumps out is it's got 2 million in the bank, and it's also got Salah and Haaland, which is tough to do, to be honest. You've got Porro, you've got Gvardiol, so it's not even like you've gone like really cheap in the defence. Where you do seem to have gone cheap is in the midfield, which I don't necessarily hate. I mean, I like Smith Rowe, as I mentioned a minute ago. I really like Bailey as a pick. I think that he could quite easily be not kind of cover for Watkins, but at 6.5 million, I think he'll start quite a lot of games, and he had fantastic numbers at the end of last season, so I really like him. The only thing about some of these picks is that it might be a bit kind of short term. Players like Murphy, I expect Murphy to start the first game. As I mentioned in my video yesterday about players to avoid when I was talking about Gordon, I think Murphy will start the first game, and he's had a fantastic preseason. Same with Oscar Bob. It's got him currently on the bench here. You probably wouldn't bench him. I think it's mainly a minutes thing that puts him on the bench. But again, I do expect him to start the first game. You'd hope he'd get the Ipswich game in game week 2. But after that, his minutes could be a bit ropey. Lewis Hall as well. He's another kind of risk. I do really like him. I think that he probably does have that left back spot at Newcastle at the moment. I think it will take bad performances from him for him to lose it, but it is another risk. And then you've got two 4.5 defenders, on the bench in Konza and Robinson. As I talked about in my draft the other day, Konza and Porro rotate brilliantly. You play Porro the first two, and then after that, Konza's fixtures get good. So I like both of them in the team. Robinson's great as well, to be honest. He started 37 games last season, so no X minutes kind of risk or issue there. And you've got Sells in goal, which I also really like. Forest defence was brilliant last season. They completely underperformed their numbers, so I expect to see a lot more clean sheets from them. Sells was the one who started the last pre-season friendly, so it's probably his place to lose, although again, he is a slight risk. But you've got 2 million in the bank, so you can kind of do whatever with it. I do really like this team. I think it's very different. You are missing some kind of key players that will be popular, the likes of Trent, the likes of a Saka slash Son slash Foden, that kind of price point. If you want to get to one of them players, it will be quite tough once Foden's back and once they kind of start hitting the ground running. It'll be quite tough to get to any of them without losing Salah. That's the only thing I'd say. But as a kind of differential team, short-term team, I really like it. The AI models giving it a 91% rating as well. That's pretty high, given you've got 2 million in the bank to play with. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of it. On to the third team now, which was sent in by William on Twitter. This is slightly more like the first team that we looked at. There's a few different players though. So, firstly, he's got Raya in goal. He's definitely the best goalkeeper in the game if price wasn't a factor. Plays for the best defence, so he's most likely to keep the most clean sheets. But I personally don't like a premium goalkeeper. I think the options at 4.5 million are always not better, but I just would rather spend less on that position given that they have the lowest ceiling of points. Unless they save a penalty, you're rarely going to get more than 6-7 points. So, yeah, I always like to spend 4.5, but if you're going to spend more, Raya is the one. The back three of Trent, Porro, and Munoz is the same that was in my draft the other day, so obviously really like that. Same with Saka and Bruno Fernandes, both in my team, both on penalties, both good for minutes. I like them both. Smith Rowe we've already talked about. great pick. A new one, Minte, I presume that's how it's pronounced. Correct me if I'm wrong. For Brighton at 5.5, he's another great option, to be honest. He started the last three pre-season games for Brighton. He scored 2 goals in those 3 games, I believe. Again, the only problem we've got is his minutes. His minutes are probably a slight risk, but looking at the rest of the team, there isn't really any other minutes risks in the team. So I think it's fine to have one kind of risky pick. Front three is good: Haaland, Isak, and Solanke, who we haven't talked about yet, but obviously a great pick. 7.5 million could be a bargain. The one thing I would like to know is if he'll get pens from Son. I would imagine, well, it's more of a guess. I'd guess that Son keeps them for now, but Solanke's record's good, obviously, we know that. Even without pens, he's probably still a good pick at 7.5 million, but I think I'm personally just going to give it a little bit of time to suss it out. Although Ange Postecoglou did say that he pretty much will start in Game Week 1, or he can start in Game Week 1, so that's not an issue. The bench is full of budget players, so Turner, Barco, Harwood Bellis, and Bergval. Turner, I talked about in my players to avoid video yesterday, so go and check that out for the reasons I don't like Turner. But yeah, I wouldn't be going with him. The other three are all good. Harwood Bellis should play most games by what it looks like from pre-season. He seems to be part of that first 11 for Southampton. Barco looks good for the first few weeks. Bergval, not so much. I imagine he's competing with Kulusevski and Maddison for that kind of 10 or highest 8 position. I do think he'll get minutes this season, and he does seem like a really good player, but I wouldn't want to rely on him. So that is probably the only thing with this draft, is that the bench is very, very weak. And if you've got someone like Minte in there, if he just doesn't start one game, you don't have much cover for him. But the rest of the team is full of good, non-risky players. So I think if you're going without a bench, then yeah, you need to pick safe players for minutes. It also gets a 91% rating. And like I say, a lot of the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the starting 11 are in my current draft. So yeah, I also really like his team. Again, probably a 8 out of 10. Okay, this next team was sent in by Carl on Instagram. Um, this team kind of has a lot of the parts that we've talked about in the previous three. For example, the front three of Haaland, Isak, Solanke. We've talked about all 4 of those midfielders in Bailey and Kunku, Saka, Jota. We talked about Oscar Bob, who's on the bench. Talked about Konza also. The defence is slightly different though. So we have talked about Lewis Hall, but they've gone for Gvardiol and Virgil van Dijk. I do like Virgil van Dijk in that Liverpool's fixtures are brilliant, so going for him is a way of kind of getting those good fixtures. I do think also that Kwanzaa could be an option to get those early fixtures, but I'd maybe only want to go for Kwanzaa if you're thinking of an early wild card. I think that Kwanzaa probably starts the first couple of games, but Konate will always be there unless he gets injured again, which is probably quite likely. But Konate will be there. So it could only take 1 or 2 bad performances from Kwanzaa for him to be dropped. I also just kind of think that it's worth paying the extra 1 million, or finding the extra 1 million to go from Virgil to Trent, to be honest. I think that Trent at 7 million is just good value. Not sure exactly where that could come from in this team, but yeah, I probably would try and find that 1 million to get to Trent from Virgil. Gvardiol's a good pick. Obviously, his game week 1 fixture isn't the best, but Ipswich at home, game week 2, just looks like a fantastic fixture, especially if he keeps on playing that left back role where he's getting pretty high. This goalkeeper combination of Henderson and Valdemarson is interesting. Valdemarson's just 4 million, obviously, so not much to say about that. but Henderson is one I really like. It looks like Henderson is going to be the Palace #1 this season. So picking him is good because Palace's defensive numbers last season were fantastic. They're up there with Forest. I think they were fifth overall for XGC last season, behind the likes of City, Arsenal, Liverpool. So yeah, right up there. So I'm a big fan of the Henderson pick now that we know he's #1. This team gets a 92% rating on Fantasy Football Hub's AI model. And yeah, I can see why. I mean, the front seven, if you look at the predicted points there, all in the green for the first three fixtures. And then Guardiola obviously gets pretty high on the predicted points as well. Lewis Hall's is probably slightly lower just because the minutes probably diminish a little bit, but whether that actually happens or not, I'm not too sure. But yeah, I'm a big fan of this team, so I'd probably give it 8 or maybe even 9 out of 10. Okay, so that brings us to an end. Thank you to everyone for sending your teams in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and use the link in the description for 50% off at Fantasy Football Hub. Don't forget that ends the Game Week 1 deadline, so make sure you're quick with that, and I'll see you in the next one.